What's up, family? Welcome to another Melanin Mental Health Monday here at the Melanin Mental Health Initiative. That is a mouthful, but I love it. Do you guys remember the giveaway from last week? Well, today at the end of this video, of course you got to watch to the end again, I'm going to actually do the drawing live of the 2 winners of those mini self-care kits. So stay tuned for that, and I'm excited to see who wins. And here are the details once again, just in case you forgot. Since I am a huge proponent of self-care and journaling is by far my favorite self-care activity, I'm giving away these awesome journals. In this set you have the journal, a 20-ounce stainless steel water bottle, and some dark chocolate. And in this set you have a set of 3 journals, some nice pens, more chocolate, and an awesome candle from Target that says confidence and freedom, and it smells amazing. For today's Melanin Mental Health Monday topic, I want to talk about something that is particularly fresh for me this week, and that's anxiety. But before I delve into that, I want to reiterate one of our goals in doing this work, and that is to really normalize the conversation surrounding mental health within communities of color. So that means we want to make this conversation normal. It's normal to talk about your mental health. It's normal to, vent to your friends and to your family, because that space is safe, and that help is available and resources are available. So normalizing that conversation, because in normalizing it, we inherently grant permission to those of us who struggle, and anybody, permission to be open and honest about it, to reach out when you need help. And to start that healing process. But until that conversation is normal, until it's a safe space, and until we are able to openly and honestly name it and reach out, we won't be able to begin our healing process. So that's our goal, is to normalize that process, that conversation rather. Along those lines, as I'm sharing with you, and as I'm hoping that you guys will share too, I'm going to be transparent and I'm going to be honest. As a human being, first and foremost, regardless of credentials, regardless of degrees and experience and professional appointments, it's about being honest and transparent, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. Okay. So as I'm doing that, I encourage you to also be honest and open and engage, because that's part of normalizing the conversation. So we're going to be honest, we're going to be transparent, and we're going to be open and welcoming and supportive of one another as we continue to explore mental health. So I just wanted to get that little tidbit out there. So back to anxiety. I'll start by making a 2-part disclaimer about anxiety really quick. So for me, I've never been clinically diagnosed, with an anxiety disorder. However, I have experienced periods of higher than normal, and sometimes significantly higher than normal, anxiety in my life, and which is what it was like for me this past week. Now that's part 1. Part 2 is that along those lines, you don't have to be clinically diagnosed with an anxiety disorder in order to experience high levels of anxiety. Okay, so those specific anxiety disorders, such as PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, acute stress disorder, any of those things, that's going to be a conversation for another day, and we'll definitely be hitting on those. But today I want to lend our time to that kind of, limbo space in between, where you're not quite meeting the threshold for a clinical diagnosis, but you're also significantly higher than normal levels of anxiety. Because I feel like we all find ourselves within that space from time to time in our lives, where it can be triggered by, things that we're experiencing in our lives, in our relationships, and, work, stress. It can be triggered by other mental illnesses that you may deal with. I often find that the higher levels of anxiety, is triggered by my depression. And so I feel like it's pretty common, and I want to talk a little bit about that space today, but then also how to recognize if you're in that space, if you are experiencing higher than normal levels of anxiety. And we all have different symptoms when it comes to our anxiety, especially if you aren't clinically diagnosed. You don't have the textbook sort of symptoms. And so some of it can manifest in many different ways for many different people. And so some of the things I'm going to hit on really quickly about recognizing it is just a small tip of the iceberg of what that can look like and how it can manifest. In that space of high anxiety, it's a couple of things to remember. Number one is that space can be triggered by any number of things. What triggers one person may not necessarily trigger the next person. What triggers you today may not necessarily trigger you tomorrow. So it can be triggered by anything, but what I think is important, and I think pretty common across people, is that one of the biggest triggers is stress and carrying the load for many people, and feeling like you have so many responsibilities and so many things to do, and you're not allowed to be weak or to feel weak or to stumble at all, because somehow that will inherently say that you're less than. Again, there's that less than, or that you're not capable of. And so we carry that stress into so many different spaces in our lives. In our work life, that work comes home. In our family life, then that goes to, your social life with your friends, and all these different spaces. And then we look up, and in every aspect of our lives, we're overwhelmed, because we're carrying that anxiety from one situation to the next, because of that stress. So one of the key things you'll have to do is examine yourself and examine your life and recognize when you need to cut back and when you need to take a seat, and be okay with that. Okay. And that's another conversation for another day. How do you be okay with sitting down, saying no, and taking care of yourself, so that you don't get to a point where you're on the verge of a panic attack and a mental breakdown because of your high anxiety and everything that you're carrying in your life. Okay. So that's the first thing, is that it can be triggered by anything, and that stress plays a huge role for so many of us. And it's so common. We all get stressed out, we all get stressed out, but it's unhealthy and it's detrimental to carry stress to the extent that we think that we're superhuman. Okay. We think that we're super women and supermen, and especially in communities of color, like Black women, you must be a superwoman. You must carry the brunt of everything for your family. At work, you gotta measure up and all these things. So it's all this pressure on us to perform and to be perfect and to do all of these things without complaining, without faltering at all. So, looking out for that stress and remembering that those things can be triggers for us. You also have to be able to be reflective within that space. So you have to be able to take a step back, like I said, and look at, well, what are my thought processes? And what am I feeling in these moments? And also, and what am I doing? And how is my environment and the situations that I'm in and the responsibilities that I have, how is all of that playing all together? What's affecting what? And you won't be able to recognize when you're in that space or what that space looks like if you aren't reflective. Being reflective is so important. Like, sometimes I've gotten to a point now where I literally sit and think about my thinking. Okay, I think about my thoughts, because I know with anxiety and depression, a lot of times we have so many irrational thoughts that contribute to the way we feel and the way we process and all of those things. And so it's important to, in that, think about your thinking, think about what you're surrounding yourself with, and be reflective. Be reflective of your symptoms. Like, what are you feeling in your body physically? And so it's important in that high anxiety space to recognize your triggers and to be reflective. What do those symptoms look like? Okay. And if you're reflective, then you'll be able to identify those symptoms when they start to creep up, before they get to a point where now they're out of control or overwhelming. Like I said, a lot of those symptoms, they look different for different people. And if you aren't necessarily textbook, if you don't necessarily have a textbook anxiety disorder, those symptoms, then sometimes it's kind of hard to pinpoint, well, what is this I'm experiencing? And so with me, in being reflective, I've been able to notice physically when my anxiety is increasing. Okay, because anxiety is very much psychological, but it's also, it also manifests in physical symptoms. So last week, and this is where I become transparent. Last week, I had symptoms of panic attacks 2 days in a row. The first day, last Thursday, I was in my office, and it was one seemingly minuscule incident or issue that I had to resolve, a question I had to answer, but somehow in my mind, it was so huge and stressful, and it started that thought process of what if, and catastrophizing a situation. And so I was sitting at my desk, and leading up to that day, I had felt this pain in the middle of my back, of my upper back. It's like a tightness, a soreness, and I felt that pain, and this just general uneasiness within myself. And so that day, it's almost like it had been building up all week. And then that day, I was sitting at my desk, this incident or this issue came up. I had to, figure it out, but somehow it was so huge to me. And I ended up just crying, crying, and my chest was tight, my back was hurting, and I'm just crying. In being reflective, I've come to learn that when I'm starting to get anxious, I get physical symptoms such as my back hurting and my chest getting tight. Now, when I get to the point where I'm crying, that means that I have not properly taken care of those symptoms beforehand so that I don't get to that point. We're all different though, and we all can have different symptoms. And so I'm going to list off just a couple of them that are pretty common, I would say. And if you have any others to add, or if you want to expound on any of these that I list off, feel free to comment below, because I want to know what you guys' experience is. So we have physical pains that typically seem to have no medical explanation, excessive overthinking and worrying, inability to control your emotion, control or contain your emotions. And that was me when I was just crying in the office, just crying. Irritability and frustration. Now that is me through and through. Avoidance. So you're trying to avoid the situation that causes you stress. You avoid the situation that causes you worry and fear. And you avoid the feelings that come along with that. So avoidance on so many different levels. Inability to focus. That's a big one. How can you focus when your mind is racing, your thoughts are racing, you're consumed with worry? How can you focus? This other one I wanted to mention really quickly, self-medicating. So, self-medicating is unhealthy on many levels, but how do you know that the self-medicating that you're doing is tied to anxiety? Is when you do it because you want to relax or take the edge off, or even to escape the worry and the stress and everything that you're experiencing. If you're doing it for those reasons, then you know that it's tied to anxiety. So those are some of the symptoms of higher levels of anxiety. So like I said, comment below what your experience is with anxiety, what your symptoms are, and then check back with us next week, because that's when I'll be talking about, well, what do you do to manage that space, right? That space of not quite a clinical diagnosis of anxiety, but you're significantly high on the anxiety spectrum. Now it's time for the giveaway. Thank you guys so much for sharing the video last week, commenting on the video, and just really engaging in that conversation. I really appreciate it. So for everyone who did those things, your name is in the bucket. So I'll go ahead and do it blindly. And we are going to have 2 winners, one for each self-care kit. So the first winner is Brittany Maddox, my girl. Yes, you won. All right. And the second winner is, let's grab one, fingers crossed, Jamila Boss Jones. Yes. Congratulations, guys. Girls, rather. All right, family. Thank you for joining us for our first conversation about anxiety today. Be sure to like this video, share this video, and comment below your experiences with anxiety, because we want to continue this conversation, and we will definitely continue it next week at our next Melanin Mental Health Monday. Also, we'll be having another giveaway at the end of next week. So stay tuned for that as well. Until then, take care of yourself. Remember that your mental health matters, and we're all in this together. I'm DiTallianna Patterson, and this is SNC. I'm just kidding. Bye, y'all.